to really make a change in this world, and that is who Paul was. So I came to tell somebody today who has been pleading with God, and God has been silent. You've cried, you've prayed, and still the thorn is there. Paul didn't say what the thorn was, and I'm so glad he didn't. I'm so glad the Word of God does not tell us specifically what that thorn was. Because if it did, I think that there would be people that would go, oh, that was his thorn? He dealt with that. That's really not much to deal with. They would dismiss it. And then you'd have people who would go, oh, well, if that was his thorn and I'm dealing with this, then what's wrong with me? Why am I acting this way? Or if that was his thorn and you knew what it was, maybe you would sit there and if it was something he dealt with his flesh, or it could have been some type of particular sin that he was battling that God allowed to stay there. We might sit there and dismiss it and start to think it's okay to sin. It's okay to live a life of sin, and it's not. Paul even went on to say that in the Word. But maybe because if he named it, we'd excuse ourselves from it. Modern examples of a thorn could be chronic illness. It could be relational tension. It could be anxiety. It could be depression. It could be spiritual burnout. It could be your flesh. It could, again, like I said earlier, it could be maybe a particular sin that you're struggling with. You don't want. Last time I talked about struggling with sin. Paul talked about, in my mind, I want to do what is right, but I inevitably do what is wrong. It could be something like that. I don't know, and I believe everybody in here has a thorn today. Something that you deal with. So what do you do when the thing that hurts you is also the thing that humbles you? What do you do? Paul had revelations. He had visions of heaven. He raised the dead. He was unstoppable. He wrote the majority of the New Testament. He went on missionary journeys. He planted churches all over. He appointed leaders and elders. He wrote letters to churches and individuals. He performed miracles. But God said, the thorn is staying. Verse 7, so that I would not become conceited. Why? Because the thorn kept Paul from becoming proud. Because the thorn made sure that God got the glory. Because the thorn revealed where Paul ended and God began. Paul had power. He had influence. He had divine encounters. All of these things, God used this man in mighty, mighty, mighty ways. We preach about him all the time today. But the thorn kept him grounded. It reminded him of who he was and who his God is. In Philippians chapter 3, verses 4 through 7, Paul lists different qualifications that he could boast about, that he could be all about him. Look what I've done, look who I am. But instead, he counted them as loss. In Galatians 6 and 14, may I never boast except in the cross. Paul realized how important that was, that he said, if I'm going to boast about anything, I'll boast about what Christ did for me, about what Christ did for us. God will bless you enough to be effective and break you enough to stay humble. Maybe your thorn is chronic pain. Maybe it's that family member you can't fix. Maybe it's anxiety, depression, disappointment, or rejection. God will bless you enough to be effective, and He will break you enough to stay humble. Can you imagine all these things Paul did? If there wasn't a thorn there, he could have very easily started to develop this mindset of, I did this. Yeah, God's here, but I did this. Maybe that's why God allowed it to happen, because He knew. He knows how us humans can be. He knows how we can be. And one thing I've learned about God is He is going to get His glory. He is going to get His glory one way or another. Verse 8 says that 3 times Paul pleaded with the Lord. Paul couldn't pray away his thorn, and neither can you and I always. He asked God 3 times will you take this thorn away from me? Will you take it out of my life? I'm tired of dealing with it. And God's answer wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. Instead, God said, my grace is sufficient. God answered differently, not by removal, but by reinforcement. You were looking for removal, but God gave you reinforcement. You wanted release, but God gave you revelation. Sometimes God says, I won't take it from you because I'm going to show up in you. You don't need it gone. You just need more of me in it. That's what God says at times. One thing I've learned, I read this the other day about growing in God's grace. You know, a lot of us, if we're not careful, and I've thought this at times before too, we think growing in God's grace means that the less and less of God's grace I need to overcome this particular problem in my life. And that's not necessarily true. Growing in God's grace means getting to the point where you realize more and more that you need God's grace in your life. That is growing in God's grace. I need His grace in my life. Yes, God has delivered me from this and that and that and this. And that is amazing and it's an awesome testimony, but I'm so glad He did it. But now I need even more of God's grace in my life. And sometimes it takes a thorn to realize that. You realize I've got to have God in my life. Verse 9 says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. A little Greek insight right here. The word sufficient, the Greek word for sufficient is arche, spelled A-R-K-E-I. And that word is meaning sustaining, sheltering, protecting. God says, my strength is made perfect in weakness. Not in your talents. Not in your nice, beautiful resume full of all this experience. Not in your connections you've made with everybody and you're Mr. Social Guy and can talk to everyone and have a connection for this and that. But in the area that you keep trying to hide, that's where God said, my power is made perfect. Is that area that you keep trying to cover up. You don't want anybody to know about it. It bothers you. This is the reversal of the kingdom. The world says to hide your weakness. Don't put it out on display. You can't let anybody see that. What are they going to think of you? God says, let it show, because that's where I move. That's where I move. I had a professor, a college professor one time tell me, it was actually my public speaking class, and she's a Christian lady. She even preaches. She is very close to God, knows a lot about God, and a lot about the Bible. She told me, she said, Shay, you really want somebody to see God in you? I said, how is that, Dr. Parham? She said, tell him what He's done for you. Don't be ashamed of what He's brought you out of. Tell people the things that you struggle with and that where you need God in your life. Because then they're really going to be able to see, my God, this person's just a human like me. They have struggles just like me. Now, I'm not saying, we all have things, we have struggles. I'm not saying you have to go around and say everything that's in your life. There are things that just need to stay between you and God and your family and things like that. But other things that you know that could really help somebody else, you want to help them, let them know, hey, I struggled with that. Hey, I struggle with that. But I know a God who can help you just like how He helped me. Romans 8:26 says, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. You don't need a thorn-free life to live a victorious one. You just need grace. I'm going to say it again. You don't need a thorn-free life to live a victorious one. You just need grace. You might be the single mom who's tired. You're broke, but you're still raising strong children. That's strength in weakness. You might be the addict that's in recovery. You're still hearing the voice of the past, but you're choosing freedom daily. That's power. The man who keeps showing up, you're not the most talented. You're the one that everybody just keeps constantly looking over. But you're consistent, and God honors endurance. You're not standing here today because you're strong. You're standing because God's grace is carrying you. I am not up here today because I am strong. I am up here today because of God's grace and His mercy and what He has done for me. Verse 10 says, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." For when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul redefines strength, not in control, but in surrender. Your cracks don't disqualify you. That's where the oil flows out. The thorn stayed, but so did the anointing. Some of you or some of us in here that preach, you're preaching with a thorn. That's what I'm doing today. I'm preaching with a few thorns. I can't stand them either. But I'm preaching with a few of them. A lot of us in here today are serving one another with a thorn. You're smiling with a thorn. And the enemy told you, you can't be used until you're fully healed. But the devil is a liar. And he will always be a liar. Our pastor preached something one time. It was on a Wednesday night. It was right after when I first started coming here. So this would have been back in 2018. And he preached, even though you're chained to something, you still got to preach the gospel. And that right there is it. The devil will tell you, well, you're dealing with this, Shay. How can you get up there and talk about this? You're not even fully healed yet. How can you go help somebody else? But the devil is a liar. And he is a liar. Paul changed the world with a thorn. You can be bruised and still be a blessing. Bleeding and still anointed. Paul didn't waste the thorn. He worshiped right on through it. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. When I stop pretending I'm fine and say, Lord, I can't do it without you, His power comes down and it takes over. That's when God really comes into play, is when we finally throw up our hands and say, Lord, I've tried everything that I know. This world has offered me every single thing possible to do this, but yet I'm getting nowhere. So I'm just going to try you this time, God. I'm going to see what you can do this time. That is where God can come in and really start to move in your life. So don't hide it anymore. Instead, use it to point others to grace. Pray for grace, not for escape. Pray that God's grace would be sufficient in whatever that weakness is in your life. You got to tell God, if you don't remove it, then give me grace for it. Give me grace for it, God. If you're not going to remove this out of my life, then give me grace to be able to accept it, and not just accept it, but use it to help other people. Make me strong in the place where I feel weakest. Don't take the thorn unless you've taught me through it. I may not have the strength, but I've got the source. I am not disqualified because I am weak. I'm empowered because I've surrendered. The thorn didn't break me, it birthed me. Let the weak say, I am strong. His strength is made perfect in my weakness, and I am walking in power today. That's what I've got, Pastor.
I don't like thorns. Have you ever gotten a thorn? You ever gotten a thorn so bad that you had to dig it out? I hate thorns. But one thing a thorn will do very quickly is it will remind you of your humanity. It'll remind you that you're human. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing for us to be reminded that we depend on Jesus. We depend on Jesus. I've had some experiences here lately where God has reminded me, I want you to give it all to me. I don't want you to hold anything back. Your life, your home, your ministry, everything, it belongs to me, and not you. It belongs to me. And if you'll trust me with it, then I will take care of you. I'll take care of you. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of your marriage. I'll take care of your home. I'll take care of your job. I'll supply your needs according to my riches in glory. I want to say something to the people in this room. Some of you are struggling. One of the reasons that you're struggling is you think that it's about your strength and your know-how and your push through and what you can figure out and what you can accomplish. In the meantime, God is looking at us and saying, why don't you lean on me? Why don't you trust me? Why don't you give it over to me? I want you to, right now, I want you to think about your biggest need, the biggest obstacle of your life, the thing that's keeping you from sleeping at night. I want you to think of that. I want you to think of that thing that's overwhelming you, that thing that the devil is trying to throw in your face. I want you to think about that. And I want to ask you a question. What would happen if you just gave that thing over to God? What would happen if you gave that over to God? What would happen if you said, God, this is too much for me. I'm overwhelmed by this. I can't handle this. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. I don't have enough endurance. I can't figure this out. What would happen if you gave that issue over to a God who can see what we cannot see, who knows what we do not know, who can figure out what we cannot understand? What would happen if you just gave that issue over to God? What would happen? There's some things that I've been having to give over to God lately because, frankly, I'm telling you, pastoring in 2025 is not a good time. Please don't get me wrong. I love the life that God has called me into, but I want you to imagine. I want you to imagine what it's like to try to pastor a church and try to love people, and I want you to imagine the pressure to preach good and the pressure to please people, and y'all, this time of year, there's one group in the church. You can't get it cool enough, but there's also a group in the church. They're freezing to death. They're looking for coats and blankets to put on, and then you have sound issues, and you'll have one group. I'll be up here and I'll get a text from some folks saying, "Hey, it's too loud," and then I'll get at the same time, Brother Mark, I'll get text from somebody else saying, "Hey, it's not loud enough. It needs to be cut up." Imagine living that life. Imagine living a life where people are transferred out of town and all of a sudden there's holes in the church and people are looking at the pastor and saying, "Hey, where's people at? Where are they going? What's going to happen? I thought God said we were going to have revival." Imagine that, and the pressure of that. It can be almost overwhelming. But you hear me. What God has shown me is that I've got to put all this on His shoulders and not my shoulders. You hear me? If I keep trying to carry this load, if I keep trying to do it, I'm going to fall apart. I'm going to crash, and I'm going to burn. Because it's an impossible job trying to please everybody. I'm going to crash, and I'm going to burn. But if it's not Mark Johnson's church, if it's really God's church, then I don't have to carry the weight at all. I just have to trust God. I've told this. I'm going to tell it again. I had, back before Memorial Day, I had a bad pastor week. And, I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but let's just say that a lot of people had a whole lot of issues that particular week. And everybody was going to be out of town. Everybody. I mean, I was getting phone calls, and it's Memorial Day weekend. I understand. I understand that. People need to go out of town and be with their family. But also, Brother Rich, God had given me a word. And I had this word, and it was in my system. It was in my heart. But I'm sitting there praying, God, nobody's going to hear this. I don't know why you're giving me this word. There's nobody that's going to be around to hear this word. And I was fighting depression is what Glenn, I was fighting being depressed, really. Because I don't know, couldn't hardly sleep. That Saturday night, Sunday morning came. I came here. It's my routine. I try to get here at 7:30. I anoint every one of these chairs. I anoint the instruments. I anoint the podium. I anoint the microphones. I anoint everything. And I pray. I loose things and I bind things. You know what I'm saying? Because whatsoever is bound in heaven is going to be bound on earth. What we bind, I don't know. I'm getting all messed up. But I was loosening and I was binding things. But what was happening was I was really praying against my own mind and my own spirit and my own attitude. And so I went out there and I got with Brother Sill and I got with the kids. And so we prayed. And I don't know, I love to have Chris Prince pray on Sunday mornings. That's what we do every Sunday morning. We got out there and he just prayed, God, help us to have good church today. Keep your hands of protection on us. God, send us visitors. Help us to have good church today. In Jesus' name, he prayed. And, this is the truth. I was out there holding a sign, and all of a sudden, I was shocked as one family after another began to show up. It's Memorial Day weekend. By the time I walked in here for the 11 o'clock service on Memorial Day weekend, this place was packed. It was packed. And so God showed me something. I came up on the platform, and to be honest with you, Sister Carrie, I was crying. I was very emotional because I knew that God had done that for me. God had done that for me. God had filled this place for me. I was worshiping, and all of a sudden God spoke to me. And he said, my people are here. He said, I can fill this church anytime that I want to fill this church. But, he said, it's got to be about me, and it can't even be a little bit about Mark Johnson. That's what God said to me. He said, I can fill this church anytime I want to. But it can't be about Mark Johnson. And I sit there, and Sister Sheila, I sit there and I thought, now I'm not a cocky guy. That's not who I am. If we were running 1,000 people right now, I wouldn't be strutting around acting like I was better than somebody else. But here's what God spoke to me. He said, if you'll take credit for the seasons of less, then you'll also take credit for the seasons of plenty. And all of a sudden I realized this is God's church. These are God's people. And God's going to take care of his church, and God's going to take care of his people. I'm going to tell you right now, if you'll take credit during seasons of less, then God can't bless you with seasons of more because you'll take credit. But if you will get it in your mind, my life is not my own. To you I belong. I give myself away. This job is not my job. It's your job, God. This family is not my family. This is your family, God. I'm going to do my best to be a good steward. Don't get me wrong. But God, these are your kids. These are your grandkids. God, these are your finances. God, this is your house. God, this is you. This is your ministry. It's God's ministry. It's got to be. This is God's church. I don't think having a limp or having a thorn is all that bad. I don't like a thorn. But anything that reminds me that I'm dependent upon God is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And sometimes it's the thorns of life. It's the problems that we deal with. It's the stuff that we go through that reminds us, I've got to have God. I've got to have God. I've got to have someone greater than me, Sister Glennis, that I can lean on. Mom Pritchard, I got to have somebody stronger than me that can carry this weight. I've got to. I'm telling you, a thorn is not your enemy. And I'll tell you this as well. Anything that pushes you closer to God is not your enemy. It's your friend. You know, I used to wonder. I would read the Bible, and there they are at the Last Supper, and you know, Peter, I'll never leave you, Lord. I'll never forsake you. He says, get thee behind me, Satan. So this is his closest friend. He calls him Satan. But then later in the garden, when the multitude comes, he looks at Judas, and he calls Judas friend. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, you understand? Because here's your closest ally, and you're calling him Satan. And here's the one who has sold you out, and you're calling him friend. Then it hit me. Anything that pushes you towards your purpose is not your enemy. It's your friend. Even if it's a bad thing, if it pushes you down to your knees, then maybe it's not your enemy. Maybe it's your friend. Maybe that need in your life, maybe that need is not your enemy. Maybe that diagnosis is not your enemy. If it pushes you to your knees, to where you cry out to God, it's actually your friend. Amen. And here's what a thorn does. I may get up here and preach. I may make a big mess at 11 o'clock. Y'all pray for me. I may get up here and I may preach. And people may worship. They may shout. Brother Antonio may run the aisles. And if I'm not careful, I'll think, boy, I sure preached good today. But then I start to walk, and all of a sudden that thorn hits. And all of a sudden I realize I'm not as good as I think I am. I need God to take care of me. I need God to take care of me. Let's stand right now. Lord, I thank you for your presence that I felt in this place. I thank you for Brother Shea. He did such a fantastic job. Lord, there was so much depth and richness that was in that. God, I'm asking you right now to help us, to strengthen us, to touch us. God, help us to realize that you are drawing us closer to you. You are drawing us to a place where we've got to depend and trust you. Oh, God, right now, help us to realize those issues in our lives that are meant to get us down on our knees, where we start praying, we start trusting in you the way we're supposed to again. God, help us to see. Help us to see that it's that thorn that's keeping us right there by you. And if that's what keeps us by you, then it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. Lord, I'm praying for strength. I'm praying for wisdom. God, I'm praying for revival. Lord, I'm praying for souls. I'm praying for harvest. God, I'm praying for impact in this world. We love you, Lord, and we praise you. In Jesus' name.